Good morning, everyone. Protocol has been ably established, but I must join also in welcoming the Governor and Deputy Governor with us here this morning. It is fitting that through your physical presence and through the brilliance of social media, we are gathered from all corners of the Virgin Islands, all corners of the region, and indeed all corners of the world to participate in the celebration of life, of legacy, and of the homegoing ceremony for the Honourable Ralph T O'Neal, OBE and Member Emeritus. Humble in victory and gracious in defeat, Honourable O'Neal always associated himself with the common man while dining and negotiating with prime ministers, presidents, queens, kings, and members of the royal family. Honourable O'Neal's homage is a collaborative effort of his family, his relatives, and his friends. For indeed, no single person or entity can capture the life and the times of such a man, such a leader. As campaign chairman throughout the length and breadth of this territory, I had the opportunity to introduce Honourable O'Neal during the by-elections of 2015 and the general election campaigns of 2003, 2007, and 2011. I am therefore honored and I'm thankful to Reverend Idris O'Neal, OBE, and to Esther, Ralph Jr., Jackie, and Abby for allowing me the opportunity to highlight a small portion of his story so that history will not be distorted and could be properly reflected. It was Shakespeare who made famous the sad fact that the good that men do are oft interred with their bones. His son-in-law, Honorable Vincent Ridley, is compelled and he has resolved not to let this be the case with our hero. On the subject of legacy, Benjamin Franklin remarked that if you would not be forgotten as soon as you're entombed, you either write something worth reading or do something worth writing about. Our people and those who have joined us must never forget and must always be reminded that the grounds that we walk throughout the Virgin Islands have been paved by the blood, the sweat, and the sacrifices of our foreparents and of great men and women of yesteryear. To get a full appreciation of the contributions made to this territory and by leaders and by our heroes, one must be reminded of a BVI of the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and going into the 60s. No motorable roads on any of the islands, no electricity, no telephone services, no constitution, no local government, limited educational opportunities, no public, private, or secondary schools on Virgin Gorda, poor medical services throughout the territory, no public clinics on Virgin Gorda, except in the back room of the house of Nurse Iris O'Neal. Globally, the Great Depression spanned from 1929 to 1933. World War II spanned from 1939 to 1945. Jobs were available only in Burnfield in St. Thomas, San Pedro, Macorís in Dominican Republic, and the open waters of the Sea of the Caribbean, where our men sailed. At homes, demand at the time were being made for the return of our Constitution lost since 1901, and that debate was heating up. With this concise background, Honourable Ralph T O'Neal, OBE Member Emeritus, effectively known as Jack, Chief, Premier, Daddy, Grandpappy by his grandkids, or Uncle Ralph, was the 9th of 10 children born to Otto and Edith and Esther O'Neal on the 15th of December 1933, on the sister island of Virgin Gorda. His father being immobile for over 6 years, he was called upon to take the leadership role at home, where he remained with mom, his sisters, and younger and adored brother Denville, who incidentally was the first deceased of his siblings at the age of 43. His older brother, including the late Waldo O'Neal, had migrated to work in Bunfield in St. Thomas. At the death of his father, his late uncle Alfredo Vanterpool became a father figure, and in later years, Ralph became his confidant and man of business. They spent countless time seated on the wooden bench attached to the huge kenop tree by the side of the road at Halfway Rock. In fact, that kenop tree was mined until they were ripe. He would not allow anyone to pick them until they were ripe. So close was his relationship that before Rasta and before Foster, Uncle Fredo was his first official chauffeur, taking him anywhere and everywhere he wanted to go. They kept secrets that are now interred with their bones. Jack attended St. Mary's Anglican Elementary School on Virgin Gorda and then on to St. Kitts Nevis Grammar School, where he obtained the Cambridge School Certificate. During this period, there exist mounting pressures for greater political participation and for the return of the territory's 1901 Constitution that was rescinded. History would recall that together with representation in the United Kingdom and in Antigua by the leaders of the day, all local heroes, inclusive of the late Honourable Fonseca, De Castro, Faulkner, and others, were hosting public debates in preparation for the Great March of November 1949. History would also recall that the Constitution was reinstated in 1950, that a decision was made also to remain outside the West Indies Federation. It was a transitional period in history. On his return to the territory in 1951, Honourable O'Neal joined the teaching service at the age of 18 and was assigned to the East End Methodist Elementary School and for a short time to the Roadtown Elementary School. Shortly after beginning his teaching career, he received a clarion call to the headmastership of the North Sound Methodist Elementary School, a position he held for 4 years. Under his tutorage, the students from North Sound were successful in passing the school leaving Standard 7 certificate or examination for the first time. In my interview with a number of his close affiliates, they recalled that Headmaster O'Neal would saddle his horse and would find the students who would seek to miss the classes and return them to school on his horse if he had to. A true 99 experience. At the tender age of 23, Jack decided to settle down and, in keeping with tradition, wrote to Mr. and Mrs. Olanzo and Ernesto George for their permission to marry their daughter, and on December 19th, 1956, joined hands in marriage to the late Viola George O'Neal of North Sound. This marriage of approximately 14 years produced his first 3 children, Esther, named after his mom, Ralph Jr., and Cheryl Jackie O'Neal Privatier. Never one to sit on his laurels, and in preparation for his political life in 1956, Honourable O'Neal joined the British Virgin Islands Civil Service as a junior officer, and 2 years later, in 1958, he became the second clerk to the 3rd Legislative Council, succeeding the late Henry O. Creaky, OBE. He served in this position for 4 years before being appointed Administrative Secretary to the Administrator, the late Martin Stively, CMG CVO OBE MC. Mr. O'Neal subsequently served as Administrative Secretary to the Member of Trade and Production, Honourable H.R. Penn, and Administrative Secretary to the Chief Minister, Honourable H. Love Stout. During his years in the civil service, he attended the University of the West Indies for a 2-month course in public administration at Trinity College, Oxford University, where he earned a diploma in government and political science and a diploma in economic development. In later years, he specialized in the study of the development of small countries. With this body of experience and preparation, it would not be lost on anyone that this was also a period of seismic changes in the territory. The Virgin Islands Constitution was reinstated. Political leaders decided not to join the West Indies Federation. The Beef Island Airport, now the T.B. Letcham International Airport, was opened. The US dollar was requested and approved as the legal tender of the Virgin Islands. The Hotel Aid Ordinance was introduced to spur economic activities. The Alien Landholding License Act was enacted to prevent wholesale purchase and speculation of lands. The Labor Code was introduced and passed. UK investor Ken Bates had purchased lands in Anegada and Wighamsky that were earlier purchased by Mr. Fowler. Mr. Charles Carey sailed into BVI waters and soon after started the moorings. Economic was on the move in the Virgin Islands. Never one to lose touch with his people. During the years he served as teacher and civil servant, Jack rendered sterling service to the people of Virgin Gorda and acted as an inland messenger and courier service when they could not travel to Tortola. He was also an advisor and counselor to hundreds of persons who needed help in managing their personal affairs. In 1969, 2 years after the territory attained ministerial governance, he left the civil service and started his own business. While serving as a businessman, he was inspired to enter politics and represented his people of Virgin Gorda in the legislature. And in 1971, he made an unsuccessful bid for the then 7th electoral district of Virgin Gorda. His personal life was not to have been forgotten. Following an extended courtship, Mr. O'Neal once again decided to settle down and in 1979 joined hands in marriage to Reverend Idris Christopher O'Neal, OBE, with which this union brought Abby, his third daughter and youngest offspring. She was born, I think it was 1981. In this union, it could safely be concluded that no greater love have you seen from its very beginning to the very end. Whether in politics, social or family life, Ralph and Idris respected each other, and it showed in every aspect of their lives. This union was consummated during the height of his political career, and as expected, it was a union of love, of sacrifice, and of political commitment. Abby has known no other life than the life of a father in political life. This nation has a debt of gratitude to the O'Neal family, and our prayers go out for Sister Idris as she is not feeling well today and she could not be here. So we join in prayers with her and the family. In the general elections of 1999, together with members of the VIP Youth Arm, Idris was called upon to write and produce the VIP Manifesto, and indeed was instrumental in leading the party to victory in those elections. Ralph and Idris committed and spent countless sum of their personal resources in bankrolling the activities of the Virgin Islands Party during the time of his chairmanship. I will be uniquely aware of this. Ralph, the man, as described in songs by Calypsonians such as Morris Mark, Honourable Shireen Flax Charles, and Queen Makisha, fostered numerous personal relationships during his years in private and public life. There was a special love on North Sound. I could not travel to Virgin Gorda with Honourable O'Neal without a visit to the home of Miss Lucy Harrigan in North Sound, and then a drink of orange juice, my attitude adjuster, with the boys on the bond. That is my story, I'm sticking to it. My late dad and mom, Randolph and Ruth Malone, together with Jack and Idris, spent countless hours at each other's home talking and planning politics. In fact, as a founding member and president of the Virgin Islands Party, and as a past member, it was Mose that convinced Ralph to join the Virgin Islands Party. Dr. Charles Wheatley and Ralph worked extremely close and in one accord. His many years as chairman of the Board of Governors of the H. Lafferty Stout Community College with Charles as president and Mrs. Eileen Parsons as board secretary can be credited to the success and the dream of the late Honourable Lafferty Stout of an institution that lived the ideal that your tomorrow begins today. And yes, Miss Patsy Lake and Ralph had a bond that only Patsy and Ralph could explain. I will not try. Political defeat in 1971 did not deter Honourable O'Neal of fulfilling his quest of representing his people of Virgin Gorda and Anegada. Under the banner of the United Party, Honourable O'Neal was successful as a candidate and represented the people of Virgin Gorda and Anegada from 1975 to 1986. Having joined the Virgin Islands Party in 1986, Honourable Ralph T O'Neal was successful in elections and in representation of his people from 1986 until his retirement in 2015. Whether as a teacher, a civil servant, or politician, a summary of Honourable O'Neal's life is nothing short of spectacular. 64 years in public life, 1951 through 2015, and during that period, 5 years as a teacher and headmaster, 9 years as a civil servant from administration office to clerk of the legislature to administrative secretary, 40 years as an elected representative of Virgin Gorda and Anegada, and during that period, 28 years in government, 8 years as chief minister, 4 years as premier, 12 years as minister of finance, 8 years as the minister of natural resources and labor, 8 years as minister of social services and education, 12 years in the opposition, and of those 12 years, 8 years of leader of the opposition and head of the Public Accounts Committee. During Mr. O'Neal's years in governance, his accomplishment throughout the territory in general and Virgin Gorda in particular are countless also. Purchase and establishment of the London House, construction of the commercial court, construction of the road network from Valley to North Sound, construction of the Robinson O'Neill Primary School, the Brigada Flat Education Center, Virgin Gorda Central Administration Complex, purchase of the Bats as the National Park, desalination water production, enhancement of the St. Thomas Bay Port of Entry, development of the Ellis Thomas Down, both the bleachers, the tracks, development of the Roadtown Fire Station, construction of the Walter Francis Dual Carriageway, construction of Craft Alive. As a member of the opposition for 12 of his 40 years in elected office, Honourable O'Neal's influence was no less impressive. In 1979, during the second and third reading of the Social Security Act, while some of the government members refused to support the mover of the bill, the opposition led by Honourable R.T. O'Neal joined with the government and bill was passed. Today the Social Security stands as an institution of which countries throughout the region will emulate. Fast forward with me to 1995. History can only describe the activities that followed the general elections of February 1995 as interesting, very interesting. The number of seats in the legislature had changed from 9 to 13 with the introduction of the mixed system that added 4 at-large constituencies. Members of 3 political parties and 1 independent candidate were returned to the 13th Legislative Council with no party gaining an outright majority of 7. After what could only be described as skillful negotiations, the Virgin Islands Party was able to command a majority of 7 members, and the Honourable Ralph T O'Neal was appointed as Deputy Chief Minister to Chief Minister H. Lafferty Stout. 4 years after the elections, in May 1995, the sad news came that the Chief Minister, Honourable Lafferty Stout, had passed. Being suited for the position, Honourable O'Neal was selected as the replacement chairman of the Virgin Islands Party and assumed the role of Chief Minister of the Virgin Islands. Fast forward with me again to 1999. A group of young men, former supporters of the Virgin Islands Party, broke away and bam, the National Democratic Party was registered for the elections of 1999. Navy blue suits, red ties, white silk shirts, and designer shoes. The battle was epic. The Virgin Islands Party green and white team and the class of 1999 was no less impressive. When the smoke had settled, Team VIP edged out a 7-6 victory, and for the first time, our Premier, Honourable Andrew Afoy, the Brong Bomber, as you called him at that time, together with Honourable Julian Fraser, the enforcer, began their 20-year political career under the 16-year leadership of Chief Minister and Premier, Honourable Ralph O'Neal. As President of the Virgin Islands Party from October of 1999, I worked hand in glove with Mr. O'Neal, the VIP Congress and the VIP legislators. The political and social journey with the Virgin Islands Party in general and with Honourable O'Neal in particular is stuff of which bestsellers are made. I can only make money if I hold back the stories until a later time. Having lost the 2003 general elections and the 2005 by-elections, the VIP under the leadership of Mr. O'Neal sought to restructure, and when the results of the 2007 general elections were announced, the VIP had returned to power 11-2 victory over the National Democratic Party. The victory of 2007 by the VIP is deemed historic, for with the passage and bringing into effect of a new Constitution Order 2007, Honourable Ralph T O'Neal became the first Premier and the first House of Assembly in the Virgin Islands. 4 years later, with the VIP loss in the 2000 general election, Honourable O'Neal declared that he would not contest the chairmanship, and when the Executive Committee elections were conducted in June of 2014, Honourable Julian Fraser was returned as the third chairman of the Virgin Islands Party. The general elections of 2015 was the end of an era. Honourable O'Neal, for the first time in 40 years, would not contest a seat. Though hard to believe, politics itself was not all. Honourable Ralph T O'Neal was a philanthropist and a humanitarian who made significant contributions to the British Virgin Islands. He was a member of the Methodist Church, a member of the Men Fellowship, a former choir member, and a lay preacher. He was a founding member of the Rotary Club of Tortola, which was established in 1968, and also served as president. He was honored by a Paul Harris Fellow 3 times, the highest award given in the life of Rotary International. He was the director of the BVI branch of the British Red Cross Society and served his people in capacity for 15 years. He served as the chairman of the BVI Chamber of Commerce and Hotel Association. His support for programs for youth empowerment has been demonstrated through dedicated service as exemplified by his association with Kids and the Sea program from its very inception until he was unable to do so due to failing health. He was a great cricketer and a lover of athletics. He demonstrated his support for sports through the support of the A.O. Shawley Recreation Ground, the multi-purpose center of which we sit today, and various other sporting facilities throughout the territory. He represented the British Virgin Islands on the island cricket team and on many occasions had served as president of the Cricket Association for 17 years. His hobbies included reading, studying international affairs and local history, and visiting the elderly and shut in. This he did, was it every Christmas or every New Year's? This he did consistently. In 1975, Honourable Ralph T O'Neal was awarded the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire, OBE, for his service in the community as a teacher and civil servant. He was a Justice of the Peace, a Commissioner of Oath, and a Notary Public. He received a number of other honors from organizations and churches, including the National Parks Trust, the BVI Farmers Association, the Lions Club of Tortola, the Angada Progressive League of New York, the Citizens of Virgin Gorda, the Citizens of Anegada, the Fishermen Cooperative of Virgin Gorda, the North Sound Methodist Church, the Zion Hill Methodist Church, St. Mary's Episcopal Church, New Life Baptist Church, New Testament Church of God, and Upper Room Victory Church. In September of this year, 2019, the Virgin Islands Party, under the chairmanship of Premier Honorable Andrew Foy, endorsed the measure, and through the sponsorship of Honorable Kai Reimer, Minister of Transport and Utilities, at the sitting of Cabinet of the Virgin Islands, ratified that the Government Administration Building be renamed the Ralph T O'Neal Central Administration Complex. This motion was moved and seconded in the House of Assembly and passed without dissent, unanimously. It was indeed the end of an era. Honorable Ralph Tilford O'Neal leaves to mourn his wife, Reverend Idris O'Neal, OBE, his daughters, Esther Whitley, Cheryl, known as Jackie O'Neal, Privateer, and Abby O'Neal, his son, Ralph O'Neal Jr., his son-in-law, Honorable Vincent Whitley, Minister of Natural Resources, Immigration, and Labor, his grandchildren, Alexander O'Neal Caffrey, Dr. Amber Whitley, and Zaria Whitley. In paraphrase of 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 6 to 8, Honorable Ralph O'Neal has fought the good fight. He finished the race and he kept the faith. There is reserved for him the crown of righteousness. He often remarked that I may not be perfect, but I try. All he demanded was a square meal and a fair deal. May his soul rest in eternal peace. Thank you.